Firstly, thanks for having me, Chetan. It's really good to be here, so thank you for your kind invitation. I apologise for the sessions that I missed. I sadly have teaching commitments on Wednesdays usually. So yeah, unfortunately.
Thanks for doing this, Alex. Thanks so much.
No, it's a pleasure. It's lovely. It's nice to see you both. So I'm not going to introduce myself because you all know who I am, but maybe for the recording I should. My name is Alex, and I'm a third-year part-time student at the University of Reading, within their Department of Typography and Graphic Communication. I also teach at Reading and at the University of Gloucestershire. And I also need to say that my research is funded kindly by the Design Star Doctoral Training Centre. So I'm going to be spending the next 20 minutes talking about my exploration into the design of corporate annual reports in the 1980s and 1990s. I'll provide an overview of the research project as a whole, and in doing so, we'll highlight the importance of the questions I'm asking and we'll celebrate the sources I'm engaging with. Firstly, a little bit about annual reports. So since 1967, annual reports have been a legal requirement for all UK registered companies and charities and provide a comprehensive report on a business's activities and financial performance throughout the preceding financial year. Today, they can look something like this. So this is a couple of pages from the of the PDF annual report lifted from the HSBC's website. For most UK businesses, they include things like a report from the company's director, a balance sheet showing the value of everything the company owns, a profit and loss account, and highlights of the year. In the 1980s and 1990s, they were the main form of shareholder communication and attempted to entice readers to invest. Also, I may add that annual reports were also very lucrative, consistent and fairly dependable source of revenue at the time for designers, so that it was quite a popular thing to get involved with. Now for a bit of context regarding my chronology and geography. So I'm looking in Britain between 1980 and the year 2000, a period of significant growth in both the number of annual reports being produced and in the number of businesses using external design companies to produce their reports. For me, this image and the one that follows summarises my chronology and geography well. I'm looking at a time when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister of Britain from 1979 to 1990, and when her policies came into fruition into the 90s. She's here standing on top of the Canary Wharf Tower in London's Docklands, now one of the main financial centres of the UK in 1990. Canary Wharf, so here's a little mini model, was built throughout the 1980s and 1990s as an expansion of the financial city. Both this image and the one before epitomise the important economic shift that occurred throughout the 1980s and 90s, when the UK changed from a manufacturing-based economy to a service economy. This meant that producer strategies shifted from skill and expertise to provision and consumption, with the terms services and solutions bleeding out from political communication and into the public domain. Ultimately, this change saw the growth of consumer-orientated services, including banks and accounting. The various forms of financial deregulation that occurred in Britain throughout the 1980s were intimately linked with this economic shift. The deregulation of financial markets in October 1986 led to strengthening competition amongst trades and an increasing number of mergers, acquisitions and takeovers. The economic health of the UK subsequently boomed and Canary Wharf was built. In addition, Parts of the public sector were broken up and sold. So this is the British Airways prospectus in 1987, so the year they floated. And this was kind of a mandatory document if your company decides to float, to produce to potential shareholders. The denationalisation of large companies, including corporations like British Airways, British Petroleum, British Rail and British Telecom, aimed to save the government money and to promote a consumer-orientated service economy, as private companies had a profit incentive to cut costs and to be competitive. Ultimately, as more companies floated, as competition increased amongst businesses, and as more people became shareholders, there was a great demand for investor relations in the form of corporate annual reports. It is within this these political and economic contexts that I'm asking, to what extent did annual reports contribute to changing political and economic climate in Britain between 1980 and 2000? To do so, I'm examining the visual and editorial conventions of various annual reports before 1980 and how they changed from 1980 to 2000. So here are the reports I'm looking at. I'm looking at mostly ones that went through the process of privatisation, as that's more kind of applicable to my research question, but also as these reports were intended to advertise, I'm looking at other companies as well to see if I can see similar patterns of change. I'm combining this archival work with interviews with designers and annual report specialists, as I'm fortunate enough to be looking at a time from which people are still alive. I'm also very aware I'm not an economist or statistician or anything, so trying to understand the language of economics is very, very difficult, so I'm having to speak to a lot of people. I'm also consulting design industry literature. So this is a database of annual reports and their designers that I'm compiling. And it's derived from Creative Review and Design Week, so very popular journals or magazines at the time amongst the design community. And both Design Week and Creative Review have provided a fairly good industry sounding board. So I'm beginning to understand the reputations of certain design companies. The journals have also provided useful commentary on everyday matters concerning the industry, and have introduced me to various discussions surrounding my question. For example, here's a discussion about the relationship between the Design Business Group, now called the Design Business Association, and the Society of Industrial Artists and Designers. So the Design Business Group was founded in 1986. Oh, sorry, slide. Design Business Group was founded in 1986 to, in their words, promote design's strategic and economic value to business and government. I'm also looking at corporate business literature to tell me of any impact they had on the economy. So I'm very grateful that there's lots of kind of journals and magazines out there directed at the business community at the time, and I found some articles do discuss kind of the impact of annual reports at the time. So in combining these sources, I'm hoping to gain a view from a variety of perspectives and responses to both design change and to the wider social context in which the annual reports operated. Who cares? This is a question I think everybody struggles with their research. So I'm going to attempt to give a bit of an answer. even though I'm not entirely sure. Despite the significance of the political and economic changes in the 1980s and 1990s, little historical attention has been given to the relationships between social changes and the design of corporate reports. The absence within the established literature seems to derive from the much wider problem of the deficiencies in the given literature that engages with annual reports. Most writing concerning annual reports has been confined to the fields of finance and business, and within the research that has been written by design specialists, the analysis is equally circumscribed at the expense of the broader context in which the annual reports operated. There is little writing from within the design sphere that looks beyond creativity and binary notions of good and bad design and towards wider contexts at work. So the question of how this change in design occurred, that I'll show you in a second, is rarely, if at all, discussed. Intertwined with this problem is the lack of researchers using rigorous historical inquiry to examine how annual reports have changed over time in general. Much historical analysis occurs within university accounting departments and is undertaken by researchers who have not yet received any previous training in critical historical inquiry. Furthermore, there are few historians within the fields of finance and business who are able to critically engage with matters of design and visual culture, as obviously it's not their specialism. The extent to which these researchers are also truly able to be critical in their analysis must also be questioned. Being positioned within accounting and finance departments within university business schools, the researchers appear to be in support of the field. Their apparent aim seemingly being to improve communication for the benefit of a business. My research therefore aims to begin to shift the imbalance in the fields from which the established literature has emerged by offering a design historical approach that combines the critical inquiry of a historian with the knowledge of design processes. In asking after the relationships between political and economic contexts, annual reports and designers, it is hoped that we will better understand how graphic design has functioned within the economy. To approach the annual reports to see how change occurred over time, common design features are being categorized to be interrogated. These include pages, printing, finishing and binding, layout and typography, front cover, photography, illustrations and captions, graphs and tables, and editorial information, including the use of language. However, it's likely that some of these will chop and change and may be condensed over time. So here's a part of what I've recently found when looking at pages, printing, finishing and binding for so I've recently done an in-depth study into BT, but this is generally the shift that I'm looking at. So far, reports go from looking something like this, so very so all A4, varnished, very kind of business looking. Then they go from looking like this to something like this. So the one on the right there is actually like a newspaper that folds out. And here we have some graphs that have been stylized, maybe a bit too much so, for the purposes of trying to convey financial information. Despite some changes in the number of pages between 1975 and 1989, as I said, the reports largely kept to a conventional and familiar format. whereby the paper size, printing method, finishes and binding on the reports did not significantly change. For example, the number of pages in the in BT's report ranged from about 44 to 78 pages long, so it's quite a significant document and quite thick. The first 40 to 50% of the report was always dedicated to the annual report, so that's like company highlights of the year, including things like the chairman's statement seen here. So that's typical of kind of reports at the end of the 70s and early 80s. So the first half was made up of company highlights and chairman's statement and things like that, and the remaining percentage of the report was dedicated to the accounts, so kind of financial numbers, charts and tables. The years 1990 to 1994 saw some significant changes in the design of BT's annual report, most notably the manifestation of the summary report that was introduced by the Companies Act of 1989. This act allowed companies to distribute a condensed account of the full report to current and potential shareholders, the idea being that stakeholders could request a copy of the full report if they desired. Ultimately, this new format allowed companies with a large shareholder base to save costs in printing and postage. The introduction of the summary report allowed the number of pages to decrease to 16.
Sorry, you'll have to mute yourself, Ms. Vidya.
Shall I continue?
Yes, Alex, please.
Yeah, no worries. So with the introduction of the summary report, the number of pages decreased to 16 and allowed the amount of financial information to decrease, being more room for voluntary disclosure. So stuff that wasn't legally required, so designers had a lot more information to play with. The summary report, which is one here, so this was a summary financial statement here, appealed to a growing readership as well. So one of the reasons it was done is to almost kind of simplify information to potential investors. So as more people decided to become investors, readership expanded of these reports, and so people, so the masses could get involved in investments, whereas previously it was largely left to kind of like large businesses and things like that that were the big investors. So now the everyday person could come in involved with investments. So that was one of the reasons I think they introduced this this idea of a summary report in formats that were quite familiar, so that looked very kind of magazine-y. And as I said before, one was in the format of a newspaper, so very quite familiar layouts to the masses. Where am I? As well as other changes, I'm finding connections between the language used and the design elements used in the report with wider economic changes. I found how through the use of design, a core message was implemented, be it explicitly, seen here, as BT attempted to explain their core values during a time of financial difficulty, or implicitly within a message that was designed to persuade the reader to invest. For example, the images used in the 1987 report revealed how BT was attempting to market the ideology of situating the customer at the centre of their services, all the while concealing its main intention to attract and secure shareholder trust. Ultimately, I found that therefore the annual report both revealed and concealed BT's intentions and shone a light on a consumer-based society that solicited individual gain. So overall, I'm beginning to find how design played a crucial role in securing and maintaining trust amongst shareholders, that because of changes in design, the report, knowingly to the designers I've so far spoken to, seemed to have transformed into an important marketing device that could directly shape the shareholders' understanding of the company and affect their cognitive decision-making processes. The report seemed to harness and advertise the government's ideological aspirations that became instilled within the company in order to formulate trust amongst shareholders and ultimately benefit the privatisation programme. In doing so, where am I? Yeah, in doing so, BT became more strategic in their celebration of the company in order to advertise the benefits of investment. Although there are many attacks of the corporate milieu in the 1980s and 1990s by design critics and commentators, the role of the annual report within the corporate sphere has been forgotten. This is surprising, as I am sceptical. Sorry, I just lost my page. This is surprising, as I'm sceptical of annual reports at the time. As a vital piece of shareholder communication in the 80s and 90s, they increasingly seem like a significant marketing ploy by advertisers, which ultimately companies were. Sociologists have shown how financial markets are framed by material tools which shape cognitive decision-making processes. Annual reports seem to fit into this framework in terms of general accountability and corporate governance. I'm therefore thinking that report work was important in the political and economic transition at the time. Business deals seem to be both manufactured, business ideals seem to be both manufactured within the report and delivered through it. I'm also thinking that they were a way to support and circulate wider government ideology. The government pressed for self-sufficiency, and when companies coupled with a designer could express this ideology through corporate communications. Introducing corporate communications into the conversation of how social changes occurred brings an alternative invoice into the debate that some service industries thrived due to such advertising. Thank you very much.